express my deep appreciation to CORE and also to Karen Wilson for extending the invitation for me to present to this CORE conference about some leadership concepts that I've utilized here at the University of Utah. And Karen Wilson, I must say this about her, she's a friend, she's a coach, she's a mentor, and most importantly though, she's a leader who actually is willing to have those unconventional conversations about leadership that most or many organizations find taboo. So Kathy mentioned, for example, the ego game. Now imagine being on a leadership team where each one of you knows your ego game, it's transparent, and it's used as an access to you actually deciding who you are really as a leader. So I know deep down that who you know yourself to be as a leader is not your ego. But that's one of the conversations and discussions that Karen and I actually had at the beginning, and it was a little bit challenging for her because it requires you really self-reflecting and also trusting that I'm not going to laugh at it or anything like that. So with that, it's really an honor for me to be here and share some of those ideas with you. We're not going to get into the ego. That's kind of a really heavy topic. But if anyone has any questions about it, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you during the reception. I'm still going to be around. So here's the first thing. I know in organizations, the pace with which technology is happening is quickening. It's not going to slow down. And I have an Apple, and every time I go on and look for a software, it's like it's a new one. Here's version 3, here's version 4. So the same pace, though, is actually happening in your organizations, especially when issues and concerns surface. You really want to get them done very quickly. Here are some of the issues. How many of you in here experience emergencies? You're sitting at your desk, you feel nice and calm and comfortable, and all of a sudden you get a call. Epic is down. Okay? It's like, oh my gosh, the physician is not going to like me. I'm not going to get my charges in. All right, so that's an emergency. Another thing that happens, miscommunication between staff and departments, or even within your own department. One unit has a clear agreement with another unit. And all of a sudden, this unit says, nope, that's not what I agreed to. And then you got, wait a minute, I thought that's what we said we were going to do. And then all of a sudden, now you start going into stress. Okay? So miscommunications also happen. She just rolled her eyes. I love emails. Yeah. How many do you get a day? A gazillion? Some people in here probably get a gazillion, and others do not. But emails is you're going to get a lot more emails. I'm just kidding. Okay? But that's an issue. Shifting priorities. You remember you were going to be working on ICD-9, and then the government said, no, let's just wait on that. Let's work on meaningful use. Oh no, let's wait on that. Oh, by the way, I'm bringing back ICD-10. We got to do that real time. And by the way, we're changing our charge capture system. Okay, as a leader, that's what happens. I couldn't forget this. Epic upgrades. That's another thing that also happens in terms of you have this pace going on. You're trying to keep track, right? And all of a sudden, boom! Another change happens. By the way, this is not the leader. These are the employees you lead. Come on, get a grip, man. Keep moving on and keep moving on. ICD-10. What do you mean you didn't capture that charge? Okay? So, but this is the current state of what's happening in organizations. Now, the leadership that's actually required for this, you need new skills and competencies and behaviors in order to deal with all these changes. But here's the other thing. Those set of learned behaviors become almost inconsequential when you put on top of those relationships, interpersonal relationships. How about employee dissatisfaction? Politics in an organization. When you start adding all of that to what it is that you're doing, those set of learned skills and competencies and behaviors, they just go only a certain distance. What is required now of leaders, and employees are actually demanding this, is that leaders be almost like these leaders. They want to be able to still touch you and at the same time know that you're leading them based on an integrity that you can stand in. So Martin Luther King, for example, everyone in here knows that he stands for equality. That's why he exists. But imagine a leader who's leading from their ego and they're unaware of it. They are oblivious to what they really stand for. Or Gandhi, non-violence. Everyone in here knows Gandhi stands for non-violence. And then the last one I'm talking about is Einstein, innovation. That's Einstein. So you want to ask yourself the question as a leader, you're probably very skilled, but you want to know, what do I stand for really as a leader, and have I communicated that to the individuals I have the privilege of leading? So what the work that I do with leaders has to do with training them to lead neutrally, non-reaction, non-judgment. Now, it doesn't mean that you are devoid of emotions. It doesn't mean, though, is that the lightning rod that's going to guide you is going to be who you stand for as a leader. So when I talk about leading neutrally, non-reaction, non-judgment, think about a hurricane. Where is the calmest place? In the eye of the storm. So imagine having a leader or being a leader where you have all this stuff swirling around you like a cesspool, and you just calm. How many of you are in here like that? Oh, come on. What's your name, if I may ask you? She's like, how many of you in here are like the eye in the middle of a hurricane? Like you're in the calm when all of this stuff is going on, or do you go, oh, wait, look. You're running around like a robot. Oh, no, we got to do, oops, I forgot. Yeah, you're supposed to do. Is that more you? Or are you? How are you doing today? Right. Did you get that ICD-10 update going? How's it going? That's the difference between leading neutrally and then leading coming from one's ego. So, that said, the premise of everything that I do, in order for you to be able to lead neutrally, it's about nurturing yourself from the inside out. And I love these two gentlemen. The premise is you've got to know and master yourself. The self I'm speaking about is really your ego, not the bigger self, but it's really about your ego. Because when you know yourself, you can know everybody else around you, and that will guide you in terms of how you interact with each other. Okay? So, to jumpstart this process, I want to engage you in conversation. I think each one of you, Alice, where's Alice? Does everyone have a handout in front of them? Yes? No?
Yes, there are extras.
There's some here who they don't have a handout. Okay. So, in organizations for leadership development, there are really 10 principles that leaders ought to learn to master at the beginning. So I'm just going to talk to you about 4. The first one is about belief and attitude. So belief and attitude is really a mindset. It's a thinking that I have. So if I believe something, then I have an attitude about it. If I believe employees are untrustworthy, my attitude might be sarcasm. Okay? So we talk about belief and attitude. The second thing is fact versus interpretation. Sounds pretty easy and simple, but when you are in the throes of reading, separating a fact from an interpretation is very difficult. But if you want to live stress-free, practice that. The third is what I call your B. It's your barrier to empowerment. So in many organizations, if you ask someone, how come you didn't get something done? What stopped you? You might say, oh, it was those resources. I didn't have enough resources. I didn't have enough time. I didn't have, people working with me. And then I come along and I say, no, that's not the reason. The reason is something that's a lot more valuable and internal to you that you're unconsciously aware of. But today, it's going to surface, and you're going to love it. I think. Okay? Now, I've worked with some individuals in here, and they've agreed to share their B's and the impact it's had on their leadership. And then the last thing is going to be intention and communication. So when I talk about intention and communication, it's not about a goal. The intention in the communication is the energy behind my words that I want to experience when I'm communicating. So imagine having to communicate to an organization that you're going to do some right sizing, and maybe 1,000 people might lose their jobs. But you're not clear about your intention in that communication. So when you go out and you deliver, the message behind the delivery is fear. So part of being clear about your intention when you're communicating is really being clear about what is the energy behind what it is that I'm actually saying. Now some leaders say to me, I don't have any time to do that. All I know is that I have to go in and I have to communicate. It doesn't take a long time. So these are the 4 principles I'm actually going to have you work on today. Like I said, there are 10 of them, and one of the principles is mastering one's ego and the ego game. Another principle is about accountability and belief in self. And I'll just speak about the accountability, just say one thing about the accountability piece. In many organizations, accountability is seen as punishing. But that's because leaders haven't defined the spirit of accountability they want to permeate throughout the organization. So when I work with leaders, it's like, what's that spirit you want to permeate? Can I say yours? So for example, in Kathy's organization, when we worked on it, was like, accountability is empowering and it's a personal choice. So any employee or even a supervisor or a manager or a director, even having a conversation with the directors, out of their mouth will not be, you did this wrong. That's punishing. It would instead be, let's have an accountable conversation about what happened to this result. Okay? So I would suggest you actually get clear about what the spirit of accountability is that you want in your organization. Okay? All right, here's the exercise that we're going to do. So just take like 3 minutes to do this. And when you do this, do not sanitize the results. Just write. So I want you to think about a situation that's creating either stress for you in an organization, or you're feeling anxiety about it. I just want you to take 3 minutes and write. You're not going to share this with anybody at your table. So it's okay for you to use words that you think might be inappropriate. Now, if you want to share it with someone at your table, make sure you sanitize it, clean it up in your head before you record it. Okay? And then after you do that, when I take you, I'm going to take you through 4 exercises for you to take a look at that situation, and before you leave, that situation will have to be resolved. So, 3-4 minutes, just right. Okay, so the first idea we're going to look at is about beliefs and attitudes on my mindset. And many of you probably know this gentleman, or knew this gentleman, Viktor Frankl. He was the designer of the new psychiatry, logotherapy, which is about existentialism, and he was also a Holocaust survivor. And he says, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we're actually challenged to change ourselves. So for that particular situation that you wrote about, there is a belief or a thinking that you have about it that's actually impacting your behavior and generating a certain result. So for example, we talked earlier about emails. If I speak to someone about their emails, those who they say they have a gazillion emails, you can get 2 different thinking about emails. One thinking is, emails are the bane of my existence, okay? I wish they would go away. So you can imagine how someone would behave with that thinking about their emails and what the results might be. Whereas you have another individual who thinking is, emails? Yes, bring them on. It's an opportunity, another epic upgrade. Yay! So you can imagine how someone would behave and what the results might be. So when you look at your situation that you wrote on your paper, I want you to record what you are actually thinking. Now let me be clear. A belief and attitude is different than a doing. A behavior is an action, it's a doing. So a belief and attitude might be something, it's like an assumption or an opinion or a judgment that you have. It could be about the individual, it could be about the situation, it could be, that person is just so incompetent. That's a belief and attitude, that's a belief. And if I believe that, how I interact with them is going to be my attitude. So take a moment, look at that situation, and record what you were thinking. And after you record what you were thinking, I want you to take a look at one behavior. How did you behave as a result of that thinking? Not how are you behaving in the situation. And if someone's not clear about the belief and attitude, I'd be happy to facilitate just for a couple minutes. If you have that courage to share it, okay? If you're not sure about exactly what that is. And then of course, when you look at your belief and then your attitude and your behavior, you're not surprised at the result. In most organizations though, we look at the result, then we try to shift our behavior, do more training, do more, I don't know, more stuff, hoping we get that different result. And that's what I think Einstein calls that insanity, right? So in organizations, it's more about what are you thinking, really? So like a leadership team, when we talk about employees, they go, well, what I'm thinking is that employees are workhorses. That's really what I'm thinking. Well, don't be surprised then about the result that you're getting. Even though you've given them extra time off, you've given them flex schedule, they can work from home. It's like I still can't seem to put my finger on how come I'm not getting the result. It's probably because you as a leader have a belief and then an attitude about the employees. And that example that I gave you is real. Okay? So let's look at the second idea. And the second idea comes from Albert Einstein. A man should look for what is and not for what he thinks should be. I learned my lesson about this when I fell in love. Y'all remember that time? You know how you go for years and you're like romancing the storm? You really can't see the storm, you just kind of romance, you're just in the romance of, oh yeah, Meanwhile, you had a fight in public. It's okay. So it's like not really looking at what is. It's like, oh, this will change. And you keep romancing it. So this whole idea of fact versus interpretation is really having the willingness to look at something that's factual, separate your interpretation from it, and then just address the facts. When you start doing that, you're going to find that you're going to have less conversations in your organization. So if you're the type of person that likes to chat, you might find, you might say 2 sentences, and then your colleague's going to say, what happened to you? So be careful. If you really want to do this, do it. But if you still want to keep that relationship where you then don't do this. Okay? So take a moment on your sheet of paper, you read that situation, and I want you to underline what's factual and what's an interpretation. And just take a look and gauge what % of that situation that you wrote about is really more interpretation than it is factual. Is it 50-50? Is it 75-25? Is it 80? Is it 100-0? Take a look at that situation and see what the facts are. Now this is the hard part that comes in. You look at those facts, and this is the accountability. This is what makes it a little bit tricky. You look at those facts, and then you want to ask yourself the question, how did I contribute to that? So we're still separating fact from interpretation. As soon as you're in the land of facts, what's going to show up is where you were not accountable. So again, a lot of times we don't want to see where we were not being accountable. You notice in conversations, how we speak one way, it's really not 2-way. Have you ever noticed that? So if someone asks you to account for something, I have lots of reasons about the other person, or lots of reasons outside of me. Very rarely do I come back in and say, oh, this is what I did. An example might be, I didn't want to ask that person because I didn't want to hurt their feelings. How many of you have said that in here? Right? The conversation stopped, doesn't it? I don't want to hurt that person's feelings. Well, what are you really saying? I don't want to hurt this individual's feelings, and I am protecting my job security. So the accountability is really about your job security, not about not hurting that person's feelings. So again, when you start separating fact from interpretation, that's what shows up. And that requires a level of integrity with yourself and a place where you stand. So if a leader tells me they stand for being a leader of integrity, and they tell me a behavior that they're going to exhibit, an example of behavior might be like interrupting all the time. So I'm sitting in a meeting observing, and they're interrupting, they just flipped into their ego, they have to separate fact from interpretation, and they look at me, and I go. And in the moment, they acknowledge the interruption. I want to acknowledge I interrupted, not I'm sorry, I acknowledge I interrupted. Continue. Okay, so that's what happens with separating fact versus interpretation. What percent of your situation was factual? Who would like to share? 25 fact and 75% interpretation. With just the 25% fact, do you see a resolution? You don't. Can you see a resolution?
Yes.
It's a little bit hard though, isn't it? Because now the reality shows up about your contribution to it. So here's a 25-75. Do I have a 50-50? 80-20? Yes. 75-20. Wait, 75 facts? Stop my reading hard. Are you open to sharing what you think might really... Wait, to say that again, Patricia. Are you open to sharing what you think is what you say is a fact, but you think it might be an interpretation? Okay, just the fact and interpretation. You don't have to share the... Yes, you don't have to share the entire story.
Lack of alignment. And knowing that it's within my team, is it just that I interpret that we're not aligned, or does everybody else know that we're not aligned?
So she says lack of
Are we
alignment. Lack. Your team is here?
A lot of them.
It's a fact. No. Don't agree too quickly. See, that's another thing that happens. You know, you're on a team, everybody agrees, then all of a sudden the interpretation becomes a fact. Think about it. Lack of alignment, is that a fact or an interpretation? It's an interpretation. So my question to you would be, what are you observing that causes you to interpret lack of alignment? And this time give me an action or behavior.
I would say my team not knowing which direction to go. Not knowing where to deploy their resources appropriately. Knowing that they support. Just take away the mic if you want to. But not reaching our operational goals because we're struggling with what do we tackle first.
Okay. Keep going, say it one more time.
The same thing or something different?
If I ever have to do something like this, she is not sitting in the front. So you notice you were getting closer to the fact when you talked about the operational goals. So then you can get even more clear and say, we're not meeting the operational goal of 52 AR days. But you notice when you're caught in the interpretation of there's a lack of alignment, that gets lost. So it's possible that it's not a lack of alignment on the team. Okay? So you really want to have a conversation at that factual level. That's where the creativity and the problem resolution will reside. Okay? You can keep the mic. We're going to get to the beat. Okay? So problem resolution cannot coexist in a world of interpretation. So a world of interpretation is between our two ears. Everything external to you is factual. There is no interpretation out there. There's only an observation of something, and then I interpret. So when you look at your situation, you had 25% factual, and then the rest of it is just my interpretation of what I think that fact is. Another example is that when I say, you know what, I'm gonna promote this employee because I think they have potential. Is that a fact or an interpretation? Interpretation. But that happens. They have potential, so I'm gonna give them the suite of projects. Meanwhile, this individual over here is observing that, and the interpretation is favoritism. So separating fact from interpretation will clear up a lot of stuff in organizations that don't need to be there. Now the third thing is what I call your B, your barrier to empowerment. And you're gonna identify what stops you from taking action and learn how to actually engage your B when you need to. Now these are some examples of Bs. How many of you have heard the statement, I'd rather be right than be effective? Have you ever heard people say something like that? This is very similar. So it's not all about being right rather than being effective. It's about, and some individuals, they'd rather be stubborn. For others, be playful. For others, be righteous. I remember having a conversation with a leader, and you know what the leader said to me? Mine is not right. Mine is, I'd rather be self-righteous. I said, good for you. You know, it just came where I said, no, I'd rather be self-righteous. And then my question was, what impact is that having on your leadership? So when I get into a meeting, I'm like, exactly. But then that's not what you want, and you're asking for something different. You have to make a choice about whether you want to hold on to your B, or whether you want to let it go for the result to be produced. And then the last one is be helpful. So on your sheet of paper, you're going to complete this sentence, I'd rather be than risk looking or being. What's fascinating about the B is that when you work on teams, or when I work with teams, sometimes the teams have the same Bs. I'd rather be safe. Everybody on the team is safe. So they're dancing the tango instead of dancing the salsa because they're being safe. So that statement, how that would look for me, it would be, I would rather be loved and accepted than risk looking or being rejected. So the being rejected piece is really a deeper level ego thing called my fear. So I have a fear of rejection. So this will lead you also to access what is it that I'm afraid of that I actually can overcome. So take a moment and write all your, just seconds. There's no need to figure it out. You know yourself well enough. It's almost like when your back is against the wall and you have to make a choice about something. Most of the time we choose this. So if you're saying it's resources, and that's how come you're not taking action, that's not the reason. It's because of this. It's your B. So take a moment and just write down what you think your B is. I'd rather be than risk looking or being. Okay, and then each one of you will walk out here with your B. So when you look at your situation, you're stuck in your B if it's not resolved. Now, I said that a couple of people are going to share their Bs and the impact it's had on their leadership. And this. So Kathy Dallas is going to share her B.
Thank you. Can I change my mind?
Yeah.
Okay, so my B is to be needed. And what that means, because it's not needy, I'm not needy. But my B is to be needed, and really what that means is as I was busy making work. And so I'll give you a really quick example. When we brought Patricia over to work with us, before she came, I felt like I needed, as the leader of the department, to fix everyone's work-life balance. So I had everybody document the time, they were traveling, spending in meetings, we have to divide and conquer, I did all this, made them do all this work. Patricia came on board and said, well, what are you gonna do with that? No, I said, here, I've done all this, and she says, throw it away. I said, well, what do you mean? I've done all this work, and she says, it's not your responsibility to fix someone's work-life balance. And so I was generating work unnecessarily. So it really helped me as a leader to think about, I've got to think more visionary, more strategic, more meaningful projects, not busy type work.
Beautiful. Who else would like to share? Huh?
So my B is to be safe, and how that came about was that I would unconsciously withhold transitioning knowledge to all of my teams because I needed to protect my job and my position rather than encouraging them to reach out and help themselves.
Okay, so of course that shifted. And in that department, they meet their goals regularly. Okay? Which is so, and in those departments, you have conversations about your Bs. Imagine a leader saying to you, you know, right now, I'm in my B. Can I get back to you about that decision? Yes. So there's that common language. Now, who in here would like to overcome their B and share their B? Oh, you have to jump up. Yay! No.
We've got a lot of people here from St. Luke's.
Then we'll make all the people from St. Luke's share theirs. No, I'm just kidding.
So my B is that I really would rather be accurate. You know, I need to know that it's right and make it, you know, perfect, which what it's doing to my leadership style is it's making me too involved in the day-to-day and questioning everybody over and over again, and then digging deeper and deeper where people feel like I don't trust them.
Yes. Yes. Now, let me ask you, is that a freeing experience for you to really know that that's what's going on versus something else? You probably knew it, but you really didn't know it. So when someone comes to you and says, you're such a micromanager, you don't trust us, you probably go, of course I trust you, I'm not micromanaging. Now you can say, you're right. And then you, you know, it's freeing. It's just like, you know, you're right, and I know exactly where it's coming from. I have this thing about being perfect. Now you open up a conversation for those individuals that work with you on your team and say, oh my gosh, he's human. Let me touch you. Do you have a temperature? Do you have a pulse? You know, and then all of a sudden they say, you know what? I like being perfect too. And then now you have that conversation about how has that impacted your work? I miss deadlines a lot because I'm, you know, want to be perfect. Yes. So I want this to be a freeing experience for you in terms of knowing your B. It's not the resources, so if you're stuck or your team is stuck, they're usually stuck in their Bs. And you can release that very quickly. So thanks for doing that. Yeah. Anyone else before we move on? Yes. Are you from St. Luke's?
I am not from St. Luke's. OHSU, but I do have my staff here as well. And I think I would rather be someone who says yes to all requests than that person who says no. And I think I overload my team with that same expectation, and we all of a sudden have way too many projects that we
Beautiful.
Yes.
Your team is saying yes, right?
Yes.
Can you give your mic to one of them, please?
No. I'm in my lead.
Okay, well, excuse me.
So I'll share my stress then.
No, not your stress, you're sharing your beat. Oh, you want to,
For humor's sake, I'm just saying my stress is many projects that are due in a short time frame.
okay, so the reason you say you're upset or stressed is because many projects are due? That's not the reason you're upset or the stress.
I agree. I totally agree.
You see that, right? Okay.
So So my B is, I would rather be overwhelmed than risk looking incompetent.
You go, girl. So now, when he comes to you and he's giving you, I want you to see the dynamic, okay? Your B, you guys, you could be married this way. You know, bring it on. And that's the codependency that actually happens at the B level. So now, you can say no to him. I'm not getting in the middle of that. So that's what I call your B. So, you know, an entire organization or a team, they're aware of that. Clicks go away sometimes. You know, those are the benefits of actually knowing it. You get to the root of the problem. You know, rather than, well, let's have a meeting, let's have another meeting to talk about the other meeting that we had that we didn't resolve the problem. Let's have another meeting. It's like, no. Have a 5-minute meeting and talk about your meeting. Just like the two of them. Okay? The last idea is about intention and communication, and some of you might be familiar with this. I wanted to do this exercise here, but the logistics were, there were too many of you in order to do the logistics. But, and I've done this experiment over and over again. He demonstrates the power of positive thinking, but I look at it more from the intention and how it can alter physical reality. So he boiled rice, and he put it in 2 separate containers. And in one container, he asked the students, he first did this with students, he asked them to say to the container, you fool. But when you're saying it like it's vile, like you really mean, you stupid idiot, incompetent, disgusting, blah, blah, blah. And then in the other one, thank you. You're so beautiful. Oh, I love you. And that's what happened. The one with the you fool started getting dark, it started getting moldy. And then the other one with thank you, it didn't necessarily still white, but it was less dark than the other one. So he also did an experiment about prayer with water. When you pray on the water, it turns into this beautiful crystal. So he does a lot of experiments around intention and about power of positive thinking. So when you think about your situation that you wrote on your sheet of paper, what do you want to experience? So you imagine you have to communicate about that situation and get it resolved. What will be your intention going in? Not the goal. So an example of an intention might be love. It's like, I want to experience love. If you're clear about that, that will guide your words and it will guide how you behave. But my intention is compassion. Okay? So I want you to take a minute and look at that situation and really record what your intention is. It could be clarity. Okay? Now this part is also very difficult, especially if you have a belief and an attitude about the individual that you're going to have a conversation with. And all of a sudden you find yourself making up stories. They're not going to change anyway. So you're making them up. Your B is actually kicking in, which is being sourced from your fear. So now you have to overcome that. And one way to overcome that is to really stick with what's the intention? What do I want to experience? And I'm telling you, at first I didn't believe this when I read this thing. I was like, nah. All communications that don't work, they don't work because the intention going in is unclear. If I'm having a conversation with Gail and she gets defensive, that was my intention. I can't just bomb in on someone. Or I might have to rethink what it is that I'm going to say, especially if I'm clear about my intention. And sometimes we don't want to do that. Okay? that's intention and communication. So those are the four concepts that I wanted to share with you today: belief and attitude, what am I thinking, fact versus interpretation. If you want to start leading non-judgmentally and non-reaction, practice that. Barrier to empowerment, how does it enable or inhibit my leadership? You had examples of that, and then the last one was intention and communication. Again, I like to go back to the leaders, so when I talk about leading mutually, they come to mind for me. They stand in a certain place. You want to figure out where you stand as a leader, and then access that through your ego. So with Martin Luther King, it's equality. With Gandhi, it was nonviolence. And then for Einstein, it's all about innovation. So you notice with Einstein, he didn't care really about how he looked. You know what I mean? You see pictures of him and you go, why didn't you pull me a hair this way? You know, it's almost like he was this little kid. Because he embodied innovation. Questions or comments? I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Pardon?
Can you have more than one B?
No. I'm like you. I thought you did not. No. So lots of B's will show up. And for example, she talked about being accurate, be perfect. You heard all those B's in hers. The one that lingers the most is really your B. And Brandy shared hobby was to be safe. She didn't start there. What was your B? Right. Hobby was to be right. Because when she was right, she felt safe. See, so hobby was to be safe. Yeah. I say mine is love and acceptance because when I did my ego work, yeah. But it's more about acceptance. Yeah, so it's really only one. And the reason I like to suggest it's only one, the ego likes to keep us complex, keeps things complex. So that's how it keeps you trapped in your default behaviors. So the simpler it is, the less chance of you being ruled and mastered by your ego. So it's one B. Yes.
I just wanted to ask, right here.
Oh.
So I manage 5 people directly, and they all have their individual B's. And how do you start breaking those down so the team works up more cohesively?
I'm sorry, said it.
How do you start breaking? How do you start? Yeah, overcome your B with many,
With many B's buzzing around that. Yeah. So on a team, you know your B, and all the team members know their B, right?
I don't know if they know they are.
Okay, so you don't know. So it's about if you don't know their B's. That's the question.
Well, I'm sure they all have them. I can imagine what their B's are, but just going through this conversation and breaking down what we've done, it's all about interpretation, not about facts.
Right, so that's the fact versus interpretation piece. You can know someone else's B because they tell you. You're just not listening for it. So when she was speaking, as soon as she started talking, she said my B is to be accurate. But then as she kept talking, she was telling me all her B's. Be perfect, be right. So every single day we're sharing our B's. We're just not listening for it. So on your team, you know your B, right? And let's say on your team, there's a goal and you have a plan in place and so forth. And someone says, you know what? I didn't get it to you. I didn't want to feel like I was stupid. What do you think stupid might be about? Might be about being competent. It might be exactly. Every day people tell you their B's. So I suggest you just listen for it. And if you're the leader of the team, now listen for it, but not necessarily use it as a hammer over people's heads. You know what I mean? It's like you're in your B, you're in there. But you're just listening. And then in terms of that, you can interact with the team a little bit differently. You won't make, for example, the judgment of that person you'll just go, oh, they're probably in their B. In your head, you're saying that. So maybe I need to rephrase this question. Yeah. Oh, who I,
I'll just go ahead.
his B is to be confident.
So just a couple of comments, and then I'd be interested in hearing just kind of your insights on that. I did a bunch of coach training, and there's a lot of concepts in that resonate with what you're talking about. A couple of comments that I throw in there is, in figuring out that B, like I know in the work that I have done, when you actually get down to that deep level B, it's like saying that out loud is like a sucker punch. It's really, really hard to say. I think in some ways, like the B's that we're really able to just like easily throw out there aren't B's that are necessarily driving us. So kind of digging down and being in that deep space is really that thing that could be driving you. And two, in terms of how do you kind of get people talking about their B's, at least in my experience, being a leader and saying, hey, this is what my B is, and putting that out there, making yourself vulnerable, is one of the biggest ways that people will then turn around and feel comfortable talking to speaking about their B's. It's like what you were saying about that being human, that connectivity with each other.
Yeah, so, as a coach, like I was sharing with her, I'm listening as a coach, and you're right on in terms of your B it's really like surface for really what's going on. It's a deeper part of your ego. So one of the principles that I work with leaders on is defining their ego. So by the time we get there, we're just having a good time at that point. It's almost as if they've broken down their walls, and it's just okay. It's like someone coming to you and they just want to unleash because they bottled up so much stuff. When they start talking, you're just listening as a coach, and then they tell you, I really don't feel safe in this relationship or on this team. So their B must be to be safe. And they keep saying, that's probably what say, wow, yeah. So you're right, there's a deeper thing going on down there, and it is about the ego piece, yeah. And they just talk. Maybe it's just my sweet smiley face. They just talk. I'm ending now because it's 5:15. Is it 5:15 or is it 2 minutes? Am I over 2 minutes? Okay, cool. It's been a pleasure. Thank you all so much for allowing me to share this with you. And I'll be here if you want to have additional conversations with me. So thank you.
Thank you, Patricia.